So I really haven't figured it out yet, what I like more, the challenge or the abuse. I have a feeling I'm in for both of those in this particular project. This is a CR80R, somewhere in the mid 2000s, and it's all kinds of screwed up. So like our last Honda project, this is going to need a lot of suspension work. The engine, I think most of it is sitting here in boxes in front of me. I guess the only thing we can do is kind of delve into this thing and see what we need and what we don't need. So the need pile is going to need a much bigger piece of paper. So overall, you know, if you're standing 75, 100 feet away from it, it doesn't look too bad. Once you get any closer than that, it's an absolute mess. So we've got a bottom end, little tiny thing. I guess an extra airbox. There's a couple extra parts. I got an extra gas tank and shrouds, an extra seat, and a chrome pipe, which is for a different model year. I've got a rear hub, and we'll get into that in a little bit. We're gonna dig through this pile of parts. I don't know, something really looks kind of weird about these handlebars, like they're way too low or something. Very odd. So the front wheel bearings are good. And that's it. The rest of it needs to be replaced. So we'll throw a set of front pads in it if this is something we decide to build. The forks don't look like they're leaking, but this front end just pogos. So steering stem bearings, no good, or at a minimum need to be tightened up. There's no master cylinder attached to the top part of this. Front fender's funky. Front tire's not bad. Got a couple of treads left on it. Does have a radiator. This rear suspension's a beauty. The rear hub's destroyed. Rear fender's super ugly. Silencer. Rear brake caliper without the bracket. We'll have to dig through and see if that's available. Rear master cylinder will need a rebuild kit. Front number plate. Sweet. Extra bent radiator. That'll come in handy. Clutch side cover. Water pump is missing. And a lot of the clutch actuation stuff is also missing. And we got a, looks like a bottom end and seal kit. Something I don't have to purchase. Throttle. Another silencer. And we got a cylinder. This thing actually still has a lot of really good crosshatch in it. We will have to measure this up, take a closer look at it. We got the gear shift change mechanism in a bag. Flywheel cover. A kickstart mechanism in a bag. It looks like a brand new Wiseco crankshaft. Brand new. Got a chain. Looks like a CDI with a pickup coil and an ignition coil. A kill switch, another ignition coil. Yeah, here's the water pump assembly. Bracket for something. A chain guide. It's like a set of brand new crank bearings, main bearings. Oh, here's our caliper bracket for the rear. That's good. We have our clutch assembly with a couple other crankshaft gears. One of these is more than likely going to be the spacer in the rear wheel. Oh, here's our clutch actuation arm. Empty box. This is a spacer of some sort. There's all kinds of little screws and nuts and washers. Get an extra flywheel puller to add to the toolkit. Empty bag. Gear shifter. Here is our clutch basket. Got a couple of carburetors here. Not sure which one goes with this bike. We're going to figure that out. I got one K-in and one Mikuni. Crank case bolts. Flywheel. Top end gasket kit. Free screwdriver. And a cable. Looks like a clutch cable. Like I said, we got a couple extra things here for swing arm bearings. Okay. So I don't see a stator. But luckily enough, it looks like our bottom end has one of the coils on it. This looks like we've got a new piston minus a ring. And the crankshaft is junk on this. That's why they got the new crank. Transmission turns fine. A little noisy in there. All right, so we know what we got to work with. I need to go through this with a fine-tooth comb and kind of see, price up what it's going to cost to repair this. Would you fix it if it was yours? No, you wouldn't be that crazy. I, on the other hand, feel like I'm going to put myself in another KX 250 situation and go ahead and get the parts and build it. So obviously the piston is new, needs a ring. I don't know why they don't have a ring there, but I measured up the cylinder, and the cylinder is almost at its maximum spec, but it's going to go one more round for sure. We'll throw a light crosshatch in it and get that going. So I've gone back and forth with this after looking for parts and everything else, and for some reason I really want to build this bike. I have no idea why. It's calling my name to build this bike. And well, the good news is, after looking it over real close, it doesn't need much. So it just needs rear wheel bearings, the forks rebuilt, miscellaneous hardware here and there. There's nuts and bolts in the engine missing, piston ring, front and rear brake pads, rear caliper, and master cylinder rebuild kits. Front sprocket and all the mounting hardware is missing. Air filter, of course. Complete swing arm bearing kit. Rear wheel hardware. In other words, there's some little spacers and stuff that are missing in there. We need a clutch perch. We need levers. We need grips. The cylinder head is missing completely, and the hardware. Oh, and by the way, that cylinder head is no longer available. We need a front master cylinder because it's just not there. Chain slider and our intake boot and reed valve are not there. And this is just a bare minimum. If this thing was running, I'd like to put some plastics and things like that on it as well. I really probably could use a new rear tire as well. Man, so when I priced all this up real quickly, it just became not worth fixing because it was just going to cost way too much money. But my determination, I had to dive a little bit deeper into searching for parts, and I think it's going to be feasible to where I can build this and still make a profit, or a marginal profit, but can still make a profit, keep this bike on the track, and make some kid happy. So I'm going to bite the bullet and go ahead and get all the parts ordered for this thing. However, it's a little bit loud. So before I do anything else, I'm going to go ahead and split these cases and take a look at this transmission and the bearings to see if there's anything in there that I need to order as well. So let's do that now. So there's no circlips in there at all as well. So glad we looked at that. So like I said, I've got another whole complete exhaust system for this thing. Another gas tank, set of shrouds, another seat. And, you know, selling that stuff will offset some of the costs of this repair and make it potentially worth it. I'm going to go ahead and protect the crankshaft. We know this crankshaft is no good, but yeah, it may be worth saving it and just throwing another con rod on it, and potentially I could sell that as well. I'm going to take a look at these drain plug threads as well to make sure that they're not too far gone, or if there's anything we need to do to repair that. Now, as I saw earlier, we got a box of crankcase bolts. There are a few in the inside that they did not get. This is something you definitely want to double check before you go start and try to press these cases apart. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. This particular engine has a sleeve going through this back portion, and I got to punch that out. That's what's causing this to hang up. As you can see, she's separating now, no problem. The reason you want to use tools like this to separate the crankcase, if your crankshaft was in good shape, you don't want to be hammering on these threads or banging on that in any way, shape, or form. You'll definitely damage the crankshaft, and then it's no good anyway. Yeah, those bearings are done. Keep track of any washers that might be in there. Let's go ahead and pull this transmission. when you're inspecting your transmission, you want to look at these little grooves in here. This is where these clutch dogs, or these little gear dogs, go in and connect to your, or connect the shaft to the gear. If those are worn or have any kind of slight angled ramps on them, what's going to happen is the transmission will pop out of gear and it'll start damaging and bending shift forks and stuff like that. So inspect all those real good. This thing doesn't even look like it has any wear on it whatsoever, which is great. Our transmission is in fantastic working order. Also, your shift drum, you want to look at all these little lands here to see if there's anything chipped out or damaged. And this thing also looks like it's brand new. The bearings don't sound too bad. Now your crankshaft should just walk out of this side. Well, not in this case. Generally, your crankshaft will pull out of this bearing on this side. But if it doesn't, we have to do the same procedure and just push it out. There's no bearings left in there. That's just flat, flat, flat. This 99% of the time is due to lack of sufficient 2-cycle oil, running your 2-cycle mixtures way too lean, like 50-to-1 or whatever. All right, main bearing's completely shot, as you can see that. My transmission bearings don't seem to be too bad. I think they've just been sitting for a long time with a lack of lubrication, so they're a little bit noisy. And as you can see, our drain plug is completely stripped, so we will have to either weld it up solid or put a helicoil in it. So one thing that's really crucial in a 2-cycle engine is going to be these crankshaft seals. Since the air-fuel charge not only works in the upper combustion chamber, it is also underneath the piston. Because of the way the engine works, so you have to make sure you have a good seal on this entire area, and that includes these seals and a center case seal. But let me see what we can do about getting this drain plug fixed. Let's take a look if it's too bad to where a helicoil won't work, and then we're just going to weld it up solid and re-drill it. So this is an insert. They call them helicoils. There's a lot of mixed reviews on them. Some people hate them, some people love them. So if this is supposed to take a metric 12 by 1.5, let me find a metric 12 by 1.5 here somewhere. All right, so we have a standard M12 by 1.5 thread drain plug, and we try to put that in there, and that just doesn't work. So if your threads are lightly stripped, you can go ahead and use this kit and restore your threads to where they need to be. This is really on the big side, so we're going to give it a shot and see what happens. So how this kit works is you're going to drill out your hole, which is pretty much already there, to the drill size that they have in the kit. You run a tap, and then once you tap it out, you can roll your thread in. And then on the inside of the thread is going to have your correct thread diameter and pitch for your bolt. Now this is something you can do with the engine still in the bike. What I would definitely suggest if you're doing this with the engine in the bike is coat your drill bit with grease to keep any of these shavings from going up inside of your engine. And I had a viewer give me a suggestion, which is a really good idea, is to tape an air blow gun into the engine fill. And what will happen is it will blow air out, keeping your chips from going in as well. Yeah, this may be too big and oversized for this. Now your helicoil comes with an install tool at the bottom of it. it has a little hook that splines in with that hook, and then you can twist it in. Now if I'm going to install this permanently, I'm going to put red Loctite on it and make sure it's completely sealed, but I just don't know if this is going to work out here. Seems like it's threading and holding. Now you set that a little bit below the surface. And then you can thread your drain plug into it. At this particular case, I'm not really going to trust this. I am going to go ahead and weld this hole up solid. We'll re-drill it and re-tap it. All right, so when it comes to TIG welding aluminum, cleanliness is one of the most important things, if not the most important thing. Wow, look at me, sound like a pro when I literally have no idea what I'm doing. That's not totally true. I've had a little bit of practice and I feel very confident in welding this hole up. And this is one of the main reasons why I bought this TIG welder. So I've already done a thorough cleaning on it in the parts washer. I'm going to get off any residual residues or anything like that using some acetone. Then we're going to get this out of our way so we don't have any fires. Well, that certainly wouldn't pass for the prettiest weld in the world, but I think it's going to do the trick. That threads in nicely. I don't have the stock bolt, but it is an M12 by 1.5, and I do have that on order. This is my first aluminum welding repair, and while I wouldn't say it's good enough for a customer job or anything like that, for this particular purpose, I'm not mad at it. All right, before I get these in the tank and get them cleaned up, let me get these main bearings out. Now I've already got my new bearings sitting in the freezer. They've been in there for overnight, and I've got my crankshaft in the freezer as well. That's going to help to shrink these down so that they fall into this case a lot easier. I got our cases all cleaned up, so in preparation for popping in our new main bearings, I'm going to lightly heat this case, which will expand it. I'm going to use a MAP gas torch because it works a little bit faster. You can use a heat gun, which is probably preferred. If you don't have that, a hair dryer, and last but not least, you could just kind of blow on it. bearing fresh out of the freezer. Don't even need my tool. When the bearing comes up to room temperature and the case cools to room temperature, this will have a light, like pressed fit. Let's do the next one. Now we'll go ahead and let these cool and put our seals in. Let's go ahead and get our crankshaft and transmission put back in. Again, we put our crankshaft in the freezer. Make this thing slide in easily. So some of these crankcases require a gasket to go in between. I like to actually put a little bit of Permatex Ultra Black or Ultra Gray on the gasket as well. That will help seal these cases together. I use a hard rubber roller, and this gives us a nice even coating on our gaskets rather than just fingering it on there and having globs and having that squish off into the engine. We're going to do both sides of the gasket. Of course, make sure that's got a nice light even coat on it, and it'll help to seal any imperfections that you may have in between the case. And put a little bit of 2-cycle oil, and we're ready to put our two halves together. So if for some reason you can't get this to go through the bearing, first thing you want to do is grab yourself a hammer. I like myself a 5-pound hammer and just start wailing on the cases. No, don't do that at all. That'll damage everything. There is a special tool that threads onto your crankshaft, and the outer collar pushes on the case, essentially pulling the crankshaft through the bearing, which does not damage the case or the bearing. And it's the only correct way to do this. And by tightening up on that top nut, it will pull that stud through. As your crankcases start to tighten, you may have to tap around the back side of the case where the counter shaft comes through the bearing. It can sometimes hang up there, and a couple light taps on the back side of the case won't hurt. As you can see here, our cases are tightening up. before I snug this thing down all the way, I'm going to drop in my crankcase bolts to make sure that my gasket is lined up. Once I get all my bolts started and I know it's through the gasket, we'll continue to tighten this up. Now let's go ahead and make sure that our crankshaft spins free. And also our transmission. Excellent, everything looks good. Let's continue putting this bottom end together. Most bolts I use inside the engine, I'd like to put a little bit of blue Loctite on them just to make sure that there's no potential issues. When you're putting this detent and actuator mechanism in, there is a slot here and a pin on your shift drum. Those have to line up. If you're sitting back thinking to yourself, like, I wonder when's a good time to run this thing through the gears to make sure that there's nothing wrong. Well, guess what? That's the time now. So, all right, first gear. Neutral. Second. Third. Fourth. Fifth. Sixth. Seventh. All right, it's good. That's a shocker. It looks like I've actually got everything for this shift mech. Before you stab that all the way down, don't forget this little collar, shift collar. I'm going to give this cylinder a nice quick hone. It's actually got some crosshatch in it right now, but we're just going to sharpen that up a little bit and get ready for our new piston ring. So that looks good. And why do we want to do this? Well, the main reason that we will restore the cross-hatching is that cross-hatching will hold oil in the cylinder, help lubricate the cylinder, and help seal your rings. Now we're going to get this over to the parts washer and clean it real good. You want to set your ring in your cylinder and check that ring end gap. Make sure that it's not going to be too tight. Check that against your spec in your manual. Now if you look at the ring, there's a mark on top of it. If you can see that, that mark is going to go facing up. And then on the piston itself, it has a little groove or a little pin sticking up in the ring groove that keeps the ring from turning. The reason you don't want the ring to turn freely is so that it doesn't get caught on any of these ports that are inside the cylinder. Cover our crankcase so we don't drop our circlip down inside of there. All right, let's go ahead and get our cylinder in. The torque on these and on the cylinder head bolts is 26 foot-pounds. Since there were no studs, I got all new studs and nuts for the cylinder head. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can tighten these in. One, grab a set of pliers and just booger them all up and destroy them. But the more proper way is going to be to thread two nuts together, tighten them against each other, and then you can use your wrench to turn it in. You can also use that trick to get them out. Don't forget your Woodruff key. So once I got the engine back together, I went ahead and filled it with the proper amount of oil and just let it sit on the bench for a few days. When I came back, there was a puddle this big underneath it. And I was like, uh-oh, I don't know if our drain plug fix worked, but it wasn't that at all. In fact, it was coming out of the weep hole here on the water pump. And when I pulled it back apart again, I noticed that, you know, when I went ahead and rebuilt the water pump or put the water pump seal in it, I didn't notice that there was no oil seal down inside of there. So I had to order one of those. The water is on this side of the case. So you have a water pump seal that keeps water from going inside of your engine. And that's what that weep hole is for. So if the water actually gets past your water pump seal, it will drip out of here, and you know your seal or your water pump shaft is bad. However, what's going on is the engine oil comes through this bearing, and there's supposed to be a seal down inside of there. And what's happening is the oil is just running through that bearing and dripping right out. So got to have that other seal in there. So for putting this seal in, there is a lip on the inside, and you want that lip with the spring to face the direction of the fluid you're trying to keep out. So in this case, it's oil. We want to put the spring facing down. Then of course we're just going to get the proper tool to do this and tap that seal in so that it's flush and level with the case. And typically we'll lubricate that with a little bit of grease, and then we can put our water pump seal back in. All right, we're going to install our head gasket. The OEM one probably has a mark on it or something that says up. Unfortunately, the aftermarket one does not. Our little tab here is going to face towards the intake or towards the back of the engine. And then we want to make sure these little humps are facing up. The cylinder head itself has an arrow that's going to point towards the front. Love to hear two-stroke compression. All right, so the plot thickens with this 2007 CR85RB project. And I am just kind of lost here. I basically, obviously didn't look the parts over real well. And being an 07, 05 to 07, everything was kind of a little bit different from 96 to 04. And I guess specifically like 03 and 04. And I know there was some mix and match parts here from 03, 04. The cylinder itself is from an 05 to 07. The earlier models had a flat flange where the exhaust pipe went in. This is the later model, and all the part numbers are different. In fact, this cylinder head that I got is from an 04 or something like that, so it's prior to 05, but it's identical. It looks exactly the same. I don't see any kind of difference whatsoever. The engine cases appear to have different part numbers. However, I don't think there's any difference, but when I start looking at this, and I should have looked a little closer, this has the older style ignition system, and he had all the parts here for the ignition system. However, this is not the same as the 07. The rotor was different. I'm not sure about the coils or anything in there being different. The CDI box is definitely different. Now, I hook all this stuff up, and I will get spark, but I have to wing this thing over real fast. I won't even get spark kicking it. So I'm glad I checked into this now. A couple of different things here, and I can get a CDI box from an 05 to 07, but I cannot find a stator. Like, there's just nothing out there used. But looking at the engine number, HE07E, when I looked that up, that's the same from like 01 to 07. It's the same serial number, or engine number, I should say, for all of them. So kind of perplexed. I would say there's probably not much difference. Maybe porting would be a little bit different, but engine timing and everything should be exactly the same. So some of these pickup coils or coils themselves may be just on the way out and no good. So I think I'm going to get a aftermarket ignition system for this bike from an earlier model. I just need to push ahead on this thing, kicking myself in the ass a little bit. Well, I decided to go ahead and do some testing on this ignition system, and the resistance values of the exciter coil and the pulse generator are fine. They're within spec. They're within spec on the ignition coil as well. The CDI is not testable. Now what I'm going to do is some peak voltage testing, and that's going to tell me how efficiently this thing is putting out voltage. First, we're going to test the exciter coil, which is the coil on the backing plate. And we're looking for minimum for, this is, again, this is a 95 to 04 ignition system on this, and they're looking for 100 volts minimum, and it's supposed to be while you're kick-starting it. Now, this won't read properly. You need to buy this adapter. It's a direct voltage adapter, and what it does is it evens out the pulses a little bit, so you can actually get a reading on your meter. Change my range. Yeah, let's give it a few kicks and see. Getting about 50 volts. Like I said, they're wanting 100 minimum. And I get 100, but I have to spin this thing up full blast to even get anywhere near there. Let's go ahead and test the exciter coil and change our range again. And again, 95 to 04, we are looking for 0.7 of a volt minimum. And we're getting over 2 volts. Even at kicking speed. So now I have to sort of determine whether or not we have a weak flywheel or that exciter coil is bad. I'm going to say that the CDI is in good shape and the ignition coil is in good shape. However, we have a problem right here with the stator or the flywheel. If the magnets are weak in the flywheel, they don't produce enough magnetism to generate the power needed. I'm going to pull this back off and check, how strong this magnet is, and I'm going to probably say that the actual exciter coil is probably going to be bad on this thing. So at normal kicking speed, I've got nothing. I got to really spin this thing pretty fast, and then I got a good spark. So kicking it, this thing's never going to start. All right, so if you can see down inside this hub, this thing is chewed up bad. And we're going to have to replace this hub. He gave me a hub from a small wheel. This is a big wheel, and I think they're the same. So we're going to go ahead and just take some measurements. The rotor is exactly the same. In fact, the rotor on this new hub is a little bit better condition. So the center of the sprockets is the same, using the big wheel sprocket. And from mounting hole to mounting hole is 5 inches. And we got 5 inches on this hub. The center axle goes through both of them without any issue. So here's where the dilemma is. I cannot buy a spoke kit for this. They don't sell one. So what I'm going to have to do, I'm replacing the rear tire anyway, so I'm going to pull the rear tire off. I'm going to see if I can get these spokes to loosen up, and we're going to just reuse these spokes and the hoop, and just going to replace the center hub. don't have to worry about the getting the bearings out on that side. With these smaller wheel bikes, you have to take out the center bearings because this shaft does not fit through them. All right, so despite having a few unwilling participants, we were able to get them all undone. We'll hit these in a wire wheel and clean them up so that they spin nice and free. Obviously you can see this hub has been wearing so long without bearings in it that it just like is two pieces. So we'll get all these out, cleaned up, get our rim cleaned up, get our new hub in, and we'll relace this wheel. Well, this hub over here has a little bit of a hole in it for whatever reason. It's got some corrosion. One here, one on the other side. Looks like I need to do a little bit more TIG welding. This thing's already paying for itself. Each spoke is going to go in every fourth hole. Now that I got my wheel laced, something doesn't look right here. If you look at the center hub compared to where the wheel is, or the wheel rim is, it looks like the hub is way over to one side. Don't panic. This is how these are done on the Honda. Most normal wheels, your hub will be dead center with your hoop. This one here is going to be offset, and what they want you to do is take a measurement from your brake rotor side, the flat lip, to the edge of your rim, and on a 2002 up, I believe it's something like 21 millimeter. I'm going to double check the manual, but it should be right around 21 millimeters between here and there. So we got just about almost 21 millimeters. So while the bearings are still out, I'm going to go ahead and get my tire remounted, and then we can throw this thing up on the wheel alignment jig. All right, we definitely got some adjusting to do. So we're looking for a 0 deflection on our radial run out and also on our lateral run out, as close as we can get. So being set up in this machine makes it a hell of a lot easier. Once it's fixed in place, we can take a measurement to our brake land. And we got about 87.09, and again we needed 21 millimeters offset, so we just add 21 to this. So we're looking for 108.9, right? 108. And then we can set our feeler, our pointer up down here for 108. And again, I think this has a plus or minus of 1 millimeter, so not super critical. We just kind of want to get it close. And that's where we want our rim to be. Let's see if we're even close to that anywhere. So like right there, we're hitting at 108. So I'm going to set my pointer up so it's just touching. And that's where we want to set the rest of the rim, so that it's just lightly dragging all the way around. So if we need to bring the hoop closer to this, we're going to tighten the spoke on this side of the hub that's closest to where we need to adjust it. So you tighten this, it will pull the hoop this way. Also know that when you tighten the spoke, it's going to pull your wheel up this way as well. So we're going to have to keep an eye on both our radial and our lateral run out on this wheel. I've already done a little bit of an adjustment here to get it sort of close, and now I'm just going to fine tune it. You may have to loosen spokes on the other side. Getting there. Don't forget your sleeve. Let's get these new swing arm bearings put in. So first thing we're going to do is get our needle bearings in. And these need to be either pressed or pushed in 10 millimeters past the outside lip. Now I'm going to go ahead and throw this in my press. Now if you don't have a press, you could probably go ahead and stick your sleeve in and tap this in. It's not recommended to bang on this because you could damage this race. And the reason we put this in is to keep the needle bearings from falling out. Depth of the bearing, 10 millimeters. I'm gonna hook the inside of this thing up with bearing grease. Don't be shy, can't put too much. All right, let me get this in the press and press this in. This is gonna go dead center in the middle. All right, let's get this rear caliper rebuilt. I guess the torque on this banjo bolt is 100 foot-pounds. Gotta watch your fingers here. A small little wire wheel and a Dremel does a really good job of cleaning these out, these grooves out. Thing is, if you don't clean the corrosion out of these grooves, these square cut O-rings will sit up really high and make it very difficult for your piston to move. This kit didn't come with the bottom retainer clip for the brake pad, so I'm going to have to order that. All right, engine in, rear wheel back on to balance this thing out. Let's go ahead and get these front forks off and get these resealed. The bearings feel fine, but there is a little bit of play in them, so we're going to adjust those up as well. Hold your fork. But you may slide out of the clamps and fall. We don't want that to happen. Go ahead and clean this shaft up with a wire wheel. Get these bearings re-greased. You want to tighten these up till they turn free, but no more play. I'm going to put my top nut back on. I'm not going to tighten this yet because we need to align our forks before we do that. All right, so next we're going to reseal these forks. We're not getting into any of the valving or anything like that, so this is a super simple job and requires a minimal amount of tools. First thing you want to do is get your fork cleaned up, brake clean, simple green, soap and water, doesn't matter what it is, just get all the old grime and dirt off of it. If you're planning on doing a fork reseal, before you even take the forks out of your clamps, go ahead and crack these top caps loose. It's going to make it a lot easier because your clamps are actually going to hold the forks in place for you. We got those cracked. Next thing I'm going to do is screw out my adjusters. And if you like where your suspension was, count the amount of clicks out and you can put it back. We're just going to go all the way out and then go back to like a stock setting on this thing. She's bouncy. Now counterclockwise is softening it. That's the direction you want to go. The reason we're doing this is because it opens all the valving up fully to when we put our new fluid in to let the air bypass. Let's go ahead and get this top cap off. Now once you get this loose, you can tip this fork up and drain all the fluid out of it. I'm pretty sure that these forks have absolutely nothing in there, so I'm not too worried about it. But once you do get it drained, there's a nut here. We're going to get a wrench on that and get this top cap off. Be very careful with this inner rod. Make sure you don't bend it. This is kind of like all one piece, but usually these come out separate. And if it doesn't come out with this like this here, it'll be down inside the fork tube. There's really not much in there. Try to pump all that out of there. All right, next step, we're going to get our seals apart. Small flathead screwdriver is all you really need. And you're going to get your dust seal, pry it off. Now inside there is a clip that holds the seal. Get in there with the screwdriver. This point here, you're just going to grab your lower leg and your upper leg and pull them apart. This piece here is ready to go back into your parts wash or clean up internally. Again, we're not getting involved with any of the valving, so we're going to leave all that stuff alone. Now this is going to be quite similar on most inverted forks that are of hydraulic type. Air forks are going to be different. So you have a wear band here, a wear band here, a washer, your fork seal, your clip, and then your dust seal. We keep track of the direction that these come off, unless you're 100% sure that somebody didn't put them in right. in which case just go to your service manual and it'll tell you what direction to put them. This one here has a little slit. You put a screwdriver in between that slit, give it just a little twist. Now this one does have some wear to it for sure. I probably should have replaced these. There's usually a darker coating on it, similar to what you have here, and it's definitely worn. And again, we'll get this over to the parts washer and get all this cleaned up real good. This is going to be pretty typical on most Showa forks. This groove in the lower fork leg is cut at a 90 degree and it's pretty sharp. If you try to put your seals on, you're more than likely going to damage them. Strongly recommend a fork bullet. These things are like $5. I got a ton of them. However, this particular fork, I believe, is a 37 millimeter. Yeah, and I was unable to get a fork bullet for this. Now, there's a couple of ways to do this without it. You can use a very thin plastic bag and put it over this, lubricate it real well, and then slide your seal on. I did get a 36 millimeter. I put a little slit in it, and that's going to help me get this on without damaging it. But what these things do is they cover that groove. Now, this is not going to be a problem here. We just don't want to catch the metal. First thing is going to be your dust seal. Retainer ring. Now you want to check your service manual to be 100% sure what direction these go in. On this particular one, the larger gap is going to go towards pressure. So the upper part of the fork leg is over here. Our pressure is going to be here. This is going to go with the larger end in this direction. Once you get them on, you can take your fork bullet off. We can put our bushings back on. Now at this point here, you need a seal driver. Now there are a few different types. You have one of these that is dedicated for it. Of course, this is not the right size. This is for a much larger bike, but it would be very similar. I don't do enough of these to invest in that, so I also have a universal type, and this one kind of fits any size fork. And how this works is this goes around your fork, and these little fingers squeeze inside there, and then you can use these heavy weights to kind of smack your seal down inside. Now these things are much easier to use on larger forks, but they do adjust. So our seal is bottomed out. We can go ahead and get our snap ring back in, and that just has to push down inside that groove. You'll hear it snap in. Of course, you want to be sure that it's down inside that groove perfectly. And now we can slide our dust seal on. And you can use the same tool to install that, although generally you can just push them on by hand. That's it for our fork seal. Let's get it filled. Next, I'm going to go ahead and just dump fork oil into this thing until it's just about full. And we're going to pump this inner piston a bunch of times to get all the air out of it. Try to get the fluid down inside the middle of that. Right now we're not worried about oil level, just worried about getting the air out of the system. Now you'll know you got all the air out of the system because you'll be able to feel it. Now it's time to set our fork level. And you can use a syringe or anything like that to pull fluid out. And they do give you a measurement from the top of the outer fork leg to the oil level. And you can use a tape measure or anything like that to do that. It's always easier and more accurate to use something like this. And this is a graduated cylinder. You set it to how much you want as far as the depth, and it's all in millimeters here. For this particular bike, Honda is calling for between 103 and 150 millimeters from the top of the fork leg. Obviously, the lower you put the oil, the softer the suspension will be under full compression, and vice versa. So we're going to go kind of a happy medium. We'll go about 130 millimeters on this thing. And you won't be able to see, you probably won't be able to see the numbers on there, but you set that to 130. I got glasses on, I can't even hardly see it. So that's 130 millimeters from there to there. It's like a straw. You stick that on there. We will use a syringe to pull out fluid. And once it starts sucking air, we know we're at 130 millimeters. Once it starts sucking air, you know your level is at 130 millimeters. Now we're just going to go ahead and pull our center rod out, get our valves, our spring back in, and then this is where it gets tricky because you have to try to hold that up. And they do have a tool for it. I don't have it, but if you push down on it like that, you can hold it, get our rod back in, and get that snug back up. Just give this a light snug because we'll tighten it up once it gets back in the clamp. Feels much better already. You can go ahead and put your compression and rebound clickers back to where they were, or put them to factory spec. Now I'm just going to go ahead and get the other one done. Now we insert our fork tubes. We want to make sure that that bleeder screw is facing forward or in its highest position. You take that out to bleed any air out of the fork. And then you're going to check your manufacturer's recommendations on where to set these fork legs. This particular bike here, there's a groove in the fork, and that's where we're going to set those. Some you'll set them to the cap height. Just lightly snugging up my lower clamps right now. I don't want to tighten my upper clamp yet because we have to tighten up these top caps and our center steering stem nut. For this particular model, top clamp nut, 94 foot-pounds. It's way more torque than this engine's got. Oh. I'm going to double check, make sure there's no play. We're good to go. We need to torque our clamps down now. All right, like everything else on this bike, it's a mix and match. This is not a 2005 to 2007 carburetor. It is an earlier model carburetor, so we're going to go with the specs on jetting for that particular model. So we are in position 3. We'll kick that up. Let's get this carb body opened up. All the screws are stripped on it. The carburetor's not filthy. Got a 55 in here. I have to bust out the old loop for this one. 125. Although it's pretty clean, we'll go ahead and put this in the tank anyway. Ooh, she's steaming hot. After a little more research, this looks like a 2003, 2004 carburetor, which is perfectly fine. I'm going to go with the jetting on that. And that actually says 125 and 50 is where it should be. So the pilot jet they had in there was a little bit too hot. I'm going to back that one down and put a 50 in there. It also says to go on the second clip position for the needle. Pilot jet, that's going to be from about idle to about 1/8 throttle, 1/8. There's going to be some overlap on these, but the needle is going to be from 1/8 to about 3/4, and your main jet is all above that. Boom. So your pilot jet is going to be the most important circuit to make sure it's super clean. The hole in this thing and all the passageways are very, very small, and if you can't get your bike to idle properly, chances are this is going to be plugged up, and it doesn't take much. We're going to check our float level here in a minute as well. That's also extremely important. Base setting on your air screw on these, about 1.5. That means you lightly bottom it, back it out 1.5 turns. There's literally nothing to these carburetors. They're super easy. So what we're going to do is adjust the float level, and we use a measurement from the body of the carburetor to the highest most point of the float, and that is without the pin compressed. Honda wants 19 millimeters in this particular case. So that is absolutely perfect. Plus or minus 1 millimeter will be okay. You just want to get it as close as you can. I'm going to replace this clip. This clip's about to fall off, so it's way too big for this. And there's notches on there. We're going to move to the second one, which is the second one from the top. By moving this clip up 1 notch, it's dropping the needle down, which means at the same given range that this needle will be in, it's going to be just a little bit lower, which means leaner. It's blocking the main jet a little bit more. The more you drop the needle, the higher it will bring the needle up in the bore, richening your mixture. Since the 05 to the 07 uses a bracket to hold the ignition coil, where the earlier models, the coil just bolted right to the frame, this bracket is obsolete, no longer available from Honda. We're going to have to make one out of some steel stock. I went ahead and cleaned the tank out in the petcock, make sure all that was good. All right, let's get some non-ethanol and some sweet Castor 927 mixed up, 32-1. I'm missing a couple of knickknacks here and there. For some reason, I neglected to get a chain. There is a damper or a mount for the expansion pipe that I do not have. So there's a couple of things I'm not going to be able to put together. But we are able to give this thing a couple kicks and see if she'll start up. Fuel's flowing in the top, not flowing out the bottom. That's a positive sign. Choke. Let's give this beast a few stomps. Okay. Definitely needs a little bit of carb adjustment. All right, so I was having trouble to get this thing to idle properly, and I sprayed a little bit of brake clean around and found that I had an air leak right in the top of the carburetor. So I pulled it back off, and the gasket was terrible in there, so I made a new gasket. Also, this threaded piece is just destroyed, and it was just wobbling around, so that was certainly going to be getting some air in there. I just kind of JB welded that. Now, these parts are no longer available. You just can't get them. You'd have to find something used. And then when I was trying to adjust the idle, it kept hanging. Like if it just tightened it a little bit, it would lock the throttle. And when I pulled it apart, I already did a little bit of grinding in there, but the ramp for the idle screw was all gouged out in there. I can't really get in there with the TIG welder, unfortunately. So what I did was just take a small Dremel wheel and clean that slide up as best as I can. I may have to shorten the spring a little bit so that the idle screw goes in a little bit further. But hopefully this fixes my air problems. If not, we're going to have to try and source another carburetor for this thing. It sounds pretty good. Idling pretty good at this point. Well, since I can't test ride it, seeing that I'm missing a couple extra parts and I want to get this video out for this week, I think I bored you all long enough with this video for sure, but maybe I'll do a follow-up video once I get it going and tuned, just to show you that it runs and rides properly. I do need to get front and rear fenders. I may get all plastics, but I'm already pushing the limits on this bike as far as even just breaking even on it, unfortunately. So I might be just going with a front and rear fender. So let me wrap this up. I want to thank every one of you. As always, certainly appreciate you watching and everything you do for the channel, liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing the videos. And what especially helps is picking up the merchandise. The t-shirts are all on sale, 25% off right now. So go on and get yourself a t-shirt or a few, or a hat or a sticker or a mug. Got a bunch of stuff on there, hoodies and everything else. So that would be super cool. And also I have a link down in the description. If you need a service manual for your vehicle or your refrigerator or whatever, you can use my link. Go ahead and pick that up. Restorooster OHV code, save you 22%. However, if they're offering a better percentage off right now, just go ahead and use that promo code. But my link gives me a little bit of a kickback, so I appreciate that. Again, thanks so much. Keep your tank E-free, and we'll see you on the next one.